Right, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Stronger Place Select Committee. Before we go on, I'll do the webcast and introduction. This virtual meeting is to be webcast and members are reminded of the need to unmute before speaking. I would also like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Please could I also remind members of the public who have registered to speak that they will be admitted to the meeting at the appropriate time. I don't think there's anyone doing that. No. So, and also be aware if that technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Apologies for absence.
You're on mute, Laura.
Councillor Heap and Councillor McIver.
And substitute members?
Councillor Neville for Councillor Heap.
Thank you. Bear with me, I'm having a census of paper. Right, are there any declarations of interest? So that was a resounding no. Can we agree the notes of the previous meeting, which are on pages 3 to 8 of the agenda?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Have we reviewed the terms of reference on the work programme? We've practically finished on everything. The only thing that's left on there is the sheltered housing for this year, and that will be dealt with under the next item. Is there any comments on the work programme? No. Then we move on to item 7 in sheltered housing, which is on pages 11 to 22. It's to consider the attached report, and Deborah's going to take us through that, I believe.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So tonight I'm reporting to Stronger Place an update on the sheltered housing review, and I'm also bringing a paper which discusses leasing furniture. So the recommendations and the decisions required are to note the progress and also to recommend that the proposed furniture leasing scheme with Buckingham Interiors is forwarded to committee for approval. In terms of the background, as members are aware, Epping Forest District Council invited ARC to undertake a review on the sheltered housing. There was 4 principal focuses of that review, and I'm sure you're aware of those. Before I actually take you through the updated action plan, I'd like to present to you our proposed leasing scheme, which we've now added onto the work plan. And although it wasn't expressly covered in the report, our sheltered housing schemes, as I'm sure you're aware, are extremely dated and don't currently present as an attractive option for older people. We've had a look at how, as officers, we can refurbish the communal areas. And as you would expect, when you're looking at the quality of furniture, so commercial quality furniture, such as the type we would purchase for the breakout areas in the civic centre, and also the decoration, the flooring, etc., would result in a huge capital outlay for the council. So we've looked at an organisation called FRC Group. They are a collection of leading social businesses, and they're all commercially successful, and they are not for profit. And one of their businesses is called Buckingham Interiors, and what they do is they provide an interior design service. They provide furniture for not just sheltered housing, but for hostel accommodation, group homes, nursing homes, etc., etc. And they actually lease the furniture to the council. So the difference here to purchasing the furniture, of course, is that we would not have a capital outlay as a council, and the charge for the furniture would be recovered using housing benefit, because it would be a service charge. In terms of going forward, what we would do is we would pilot Frank Breton Court, and if that was successful, then we would move forward and lease furniture for the other schemes as well. In terms of other updates on this paper, I'd like to draw your attention, of course, to the ward and call system. As you may know, there'll be a change from analog to digital in 2025, so we need to update the ward and call system, and that's all in progress in terms of looking at appropriate suppliers. Another point on our action plan was the impact of reducing the age to 55 plus, and I'll cover that when I go through the action plan in detail. So before I go on to the action plan, are there any specific questions on the leasing scheme?
Councillor Murray?
There's probably need to follow protocol if there's members of the committee before me, because I'm not a member of the committee.
I do apologise. Sorry, Councillor Bassett.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I read this. I've got no problem with leasing furniture. It's done widespread elsewhere. But it would be useful if we had some financial examples of what we're talking about, because you added it will be no cost because we'll just add it to a service charge. But some people, depends how much that service charge might increase, could cause other difficulties. But it would be nice to have an example financial cost there.
Thank you, Councillor Bassett. I haven't got the financial costs for Epping Forest District Council at the moment. However, I have done this scheme before in my previous employment. What we did there, so it was an organisation called B3 Living. As an organisation, for residents that were actually in situ at the time when we introduced the scheme, we applied the charge to everybody's account, but we took the decision to credit the accounts of those people who were not on housing benefit, therefore meaning that that nobody in the scheme at that point was at financial detriment. So we will be looking at that. But moving forward, when we go to Cabinet, there will be some financial examples. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Whitehouse.
I'm not on the committee either, but Deborah has more or less answered my question, because it was about this taking the money and paying it back, which I didn't quite understand, but I think that's clear now. So my question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Kaufman.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'd like some other financial information on Buckingham Interiors. I'm looking at their accounts, and they seem to be a very small company with a very small turnover. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I'd like to be aware how long they've been going, what the process has been. I'm sure you've been through a proper process, but the figures are very, very small. And I'd like to understand, have we got sufficient comfort of the depth of the company that we're dealing with?
I mean, absolutely. I can provide you some more information. I mean, I think I need to be clear at this point, but it's not actually Buckingham Interiors who do the leasing. The leasing company is Bibby Leasing, who you may have heard of. They're quite a large outfit, and during my work with B3 Living, we did a lot of due diligence in terms of how they manage their business to make sure it was ethical. But happy to provide more information on that. So sorry, just to clarify, Buckingham Interiors provides the furniture, not the actual leasing arrangement.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Kaufman?
Well, I'm not really sure. Just want to make sure we've gone through a due process. So this is a furniture provider that then the furniture is then bought by the leasing company, and then so it just seems a little bit like an old PFI scheme where we pay 3 times the cost of the furniture. But I just want to make sure that it's not a PFI scheme, that we are regretting entering into it, because we could have bought it ourselves and took a lease on it. Just financial prudence. I'm sure you've looked at this, but it's very difficult from this report to actually understand the methodology behind the selection and what it's actually going to cost and how long we're committed for and what actually is the rolled up cost of the whole exercise. Is it financially prudent? I've got no idea.
So I can certainly put a financial example when this goes to Cabinet, but the term is 5 years, and we make one final payment, which is the same monthly payment that we would make throughout the term, and then that furniture becomes ours, and we can then make a choice of either refurbing the scheme again or not, whatever the case may be. But I will provide some more financial details.
Thank you. I mean, through the chair, I'd just like to say it would be good to know the capital cost of the contract and what actually the annual charges actually are. It would give some context. Thank you.
Will you be able to provide that, Deborah?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to say that at this stage, we're only in the sort of preliminary discussions with Buckingham Interiors. So we wanted to bring this paper to this committee first before we started getting into the details around understanding the cost. I mean, the fact that I've got some knowledge of this organisation, and they've won numerous awards actually for their work with disadvantaged groups within society, and so I have every confidence about their ethics and morals, and also their finances. But absolutely, I can provide some firmed up examples of how it works in the Cabinet report.
Thank you. And at this point, we've entered into no arrangement or agreement at all?
Absolutely not. So we're not even at the point where we've consulted with residents, because I wanted to bring the paper to this committee first, because this is not something that Epping Forest, to my knowledge, has entered into before. However, it is very common across the social housing sector in a way of refurbing large developments at nil capital cost to the organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. Some of my concerns or points have been covered, and I would agree with Councillor Kaufman that when this goes to Cabinet, we do need the financial side firmed up. But I understand from the officer that it's just an acceptance in principle really tonight. And I have to say the principle I'm okay with. I did pick up on page 15 in the third paragraph, Deborah Fenton commenting, and I was going to ask whether that was the same Deborah Fenton, and that's been answered. And my final point, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully following some reported comments about Stradbroke Grove last Wednesday, which I gave a very strong view about a planning application and a road. And I do realise residents would be involved, but I have to say personally, I found the 7 pictures on page 14 and 15 of exemplar furniture, unless they're just very poor photographs, I just found it not very inspiring furniture. I have to be blunt. Again, I suppose beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I didn't see anything in those 7 photos that I thought, wow. But maybe they're just, maybe the photos aren't doing it justice.
I mean, they do give a look of a McCarthy and Stone type, of lounge. So the way the organisation work is they will bring 3 mood boards, so they'll make up 3 mood boards, and it's actually the residents who choose. So it's not the officers. So the furniture that you can see in those photos was actually chosen by the residents, and really, to be fair to the residents, it's based on their comfort and what suits them really. So I accept your comments, Councillor Murray, but it is down to the residents at the end of the day, because it's where they live.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify, we seem to be talking about just this one company. Don't we have to go to 2 or 3 different companies and get expressions of interest and tenders from them as well, not just go to one?
Because this is quite specialised, we'll be able to pull it off one of the frameworks, so they're on one of the frameworks we use.
Are there no other companies that do this then?
Not to my knowledge, but let me check. So our sheltered housing manager has already looked at this, but let me check and I'll give them a note for the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can you explain what framework is, please?
How do I describe what a framework is? So we might have something like the Northern Housing Consortium. So you'd have lots of companies that sit within what we call a framework. What would happen is lots of due diligence would be done on those companies in terms of ethics, financials, etc. And once those have done, they're able to sit within this framework, and then organisations like Epping or housing associations would then be able to pick companies that suit their needs from that framework. So to give you another example, at the moment we're looking at Warden Call equipment, as you know, and is relevant to this discussion today. So we will be going to the Northern Housing Consortium when we're picking off an organisation that meets our needs in terms of what our requirements are. So for our Warden Call, we've got really specific requirements. So we'll look and see if any of those companies, which I know they do, meet those requirements. And because the financial due diligence is done, we can then pick them off the framework. I'm not sure I'm explaining it well. We probably need a procurement person on, to be honest.
But they're basically approved providers.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, and their prices are set as well, so you're getting value for money. So that's and often when you pull them off a framework, you'll get a specific I won't say deal, but a specific how can I explain it? So specific pricing levels. So it will have been negotiated. So it'll be lower than you would get if you just went for a quote outside the framework. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Thank you. Is there any more any more questions on that?
Chair, could I just please just mention something on the action plan for members? So happy to take, of course, any questions on the action plan, but just wanted to draw your attention to page 18, 2.1, which was kindly brought to my attention by Councillor Janet Whitehouse. I had some officer notes on the side of this action plan, which I've removed for this committee, but what we've got here at 2.1, the consultation, which is to consult with residents to gain the future views on the use of facilities. What we're actually going to do is we're actually going to delay that. So where it says it's completed with results analysed, that isn't the case, and the note would have said it at the side. Because what we want to do is we want to wait until firstly we've refurbed the lounges, and secondly we've got a couple of schemes, as you know, that we're going to convert one of the lounges into accessible accommodation. So we don't want to do any kind of consultation in terms of a survey until we've improved the schemes, and then we've sort of got a better sort of starting base rather than doing two surveys. Happy to take any other questions on the action plan.
Sorry, Councillor Murray, was yours with regard to that or something else?
Yeah, as regards the action plan, if I've understood deadlines and quarters right, 1.1 on the action plan on page 17 presumably should have been finished by the end of this month, if that's Q4 of the year 2021. So I just wondered where we were with installing Wi-Fi and sheltered housing schemes, or have I misread that?
No, you've read it fine. So at the moment we are not going ahead with that due to the cost to the residents. It would be rather expensive to the residents. However, so I will move the deadline, but I've left it on there because what we're now examining as to whether it would be feasible to add Wi-Fi onto our new Warden Call system. So we will probably know that in sort of six to 9 months time. So it may still be an option for residents, but however, I will take note of that and move the deadline.
Because I think just to come back or respond, I think we're all aware that the next generation, probably some of the generation of the current residents in sheltered accommodation, but certainly the next generation of residents in our sheltered accommodation will be very Wi-Fi useful, and I think would probably expect it as part of the package.
Absolutely. So this is, one of the reasons we haven't removed it from the plan at the moment.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's on 41B, which is the review of the allocation criteria. It talks about a review and consultation on the proposed changes. I just wondered who was going to be involved in the consultation.
So this forms part of the allocations policy. So it will be customers, officers, members. So yes, it's going to be a big project, the review of the allocations.
And this will come back to scrutiny as well.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I think we have to think about the impact on our schemes when we've carried out the refurbishments, because although other organisations have dropped the age limit to 55, often that's been because they haven't had the desirability. So if we're changing our schemes and we're making them more desirable, then we wouldn't want to drop the age limits, because if you think about it, the difference between somebody who's 60 and someone who's 90, it can make the demographics quite challenging within those schemes.
Yeah, thank you.
Members, any more questions regarding the sheltered housing action plan? No. Sure. Was there any more to add, Deborah?
No, Chair. Just asking for the recommendation to progress the lease scheme with a lot more financial information to Cabinet.
So can we agree that then?
Agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so moving on then to item 8, the local enforcement plan, or a local enforcement plan, which is on page 23 to 46, and it's to consider the report, and that's being presented by Nigel.
It's Andrew Marks, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This is a small update to our local enforcement plan. We adopted the first one in 2013. There's a commitment in the plan to review it at least every 5 years. So in 2018, it was reviewed and adopted. We decided at this time to make a few small alterations, and I'll explain what those are. And alterations is a small tweak rather than a rewrite. And first of all, if members took the time to read our old plan as well as the new one, you would have seen that we previously had 2 enforcement categories or cases, in which we the first needing immediate attention. So basically, we made a commitment to visit sites within 3 hours, and they are typically cases where a protected tree is being felled or a listed building is being damaged, or in case of a traveller incursion. And then all the other cases fell into the second category, and those we tried to visit within 3 hours. Apologies. And then we had a second category that basically committed us to visit other sites within 14 days. So what we've done in the new plan is made a suggestion to have 3 categories. The first category has got 2, or a main category and a subcategory. So staying with cases that need immediate attention, we're making a commitment to visit within 7 hours. So usually on the same day that we receive a complaint, and those are typically for listed buildings and damage to trees. And then category 1A, we are making a commitment to visit within 3 working days, and those are typically cases where people are experiencing nuisance from extraction equipment or breaches of condition where opening hours, for instance, for shops and businesses are not being kept. Those we will visit within 3 days. And then category 2, sort of ongoing significant building works that are not yet complete, we're making a commitment to visit those within 10 working days. And then category 3, which is basically all the lower priority cases, we will visit within 15 working days. The other thing that we've made a commitment to is to try and complete the initial stages of enforcement investigations within 1 calendar month. This is something new that we're bringing in to try and move cases along to make sure that officers do the desk studies, looking at the planning history, visiting the site, speaking to complainants and alleged transgressors to get information, and then come to a conclusion whether there's a breaching planning control or not. So that time frame, like I say, is 1 month, which is not something that we previously had in the plan. We've also implemented a performance monitoring process for enforcement cases. So we are monitoring the number obviously being opened and closed every month, but we're also looking at time taken to close enforcement investigations. And we are also looking at the number of enforcement notices issued. And we are reporting on those on a monthly basis to our planning management group. I think I'll leave it there if members have got any questions. I think when you read the enforcement plan, I think it's something that's quite useful for both members, but also people who bring alleged breaches to our attention, and also people that are being investigated, because it does explain all the bits of legislation, which there's quite a lot of different bits to the planning legislation that we use to enforce planning controls, and I think it's kind of a whistle-stop tour of planning enforcement procedures, and it does explain things clearly to people who are being involved in the application process, and it also sets out the framework for our officers to deal with their day-to-day investigations. It also makes a commitment to publish a service charter, which we've done over the last month or two, which is brand new on the website, which if members are interested, I can let them have the link to that separately. And that just explains times for responding to emails and telephone calls and the like. So we're hoping that people being involved or getting involved in enforcement process, either as a complainant or as a transgressor, will use the document to give them some guidance on how we're going to be providing the service. So thank you for that. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Neville.
Thank you. Thank you for your whistle-stop tour, Mr. Marks. And apologies here if I've only been allowed to skim read it since I am substituting at the last minute. But I noted that you said in your statement at the very beginning that for the most urgent cases, we were taking the time from 3 hours to 7 hours. So we're increasing it, the amount of time that we will respond. Is that because of legislative pressures? Is that because of resources? Or is that just based on experience? And if so, what sort of experience is that?
No, it's not legislative. It's purely on experience. Most of those cases we will actually visit on the day. I think in the last year or so, it may be that if we receive a call, say at 5 o'clock on a Thursday, we might not be there on a Thursday evening, but we'll be there Friday morning first thing. So it's just to allow for those late calls that come in at a late stage of the day. But the intention is certainly not to not go out to those cases as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bassett.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a couple of slight questions, and some of it is most probably semantics. Paragraph 3.21, retrospective planning applications. I do have some concerns there where it says, officers consider that planning permission is likely to be granted for an unauthorised development. That is a perception, and we need to be very careful there because, as we all know, before a planner makes a decision, he goes through all the ins and outs, previous planning permissions, and then will make a recommendation. Here you're saying, if he just thinks he most probably will get an application, then just will go for a retrospective application. I'm just a bit concerned about how that reads. Similarly, I've got in 327, not expedient to pursue for formal application, halfway down, seek to persuade I don't think we should be that generous to anyone. It is we should either suggest or request that they do it. You know, we're being a bit too kind there, because if what happens to persuade, oh no, I don't want to do it. Oh, go on, no. And there was one other thing which was under Other Powers, section 6.1, Acts entry onto land. In my time, we purchased 2 drones, which I haven't heard about their use. If we cannot get entry onto the land to actually see what's going on, should we not put in there that we have the power to use the drones to actually inspect the land?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, I'll certainly have a reread of the 2 sections that you've mentioned, because I agree. Where there's chance of a retrospective planning permission or an application being submitted, I think I did put it in there or in the report that we are not going to suspend or slow down the enforcement process waiting for a planning application. So certainly we can't stop people from applying for planning permission retrospectively, but our expectation is that officers, like you say, assess the planning merits at an early opportunity. And if it looks to us that there's no chance for planning application being successful, then certainly we wouldn't be inviting that. And in fact, our warning letters that go out now actually say to people, you may submit an application if you wish, but it's unlikely to be successful. So unless you start carrying out remedial works, we're likely to take enforcement action at the earliest opportunity. So, but I'll definitely have a look at that, at the wording for you. And then secondly, regarding the drones, yes, we did buy 2 drones for various reasons. I think the licensing lapsed for those. So we've actually entered into an agreement with one of our neighbouring authorities who also has a drone flying service. And I think we found that using them is both quick and cheaper than having our own drone. So we do have that facility available, and certainly we will we'll include that in there. But yes, we have got drone flying capabilities, and they can be deployed at fairly short notice.
Thank you. Councillor Neville?
Yeah, I was just saying, unfortunately, Mr. Marks, I didn't hear a word you said because my connection cut out at that point. But I will look at the webcast and listen with great intent on what you actually said to me.
So, Councillor Kaufmann.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly off topic, possibly, but I echo Councillor Bassett's comments about being a bit stronger on some of this wording. We've got some very notable people on this call. So I've got a current experience in my ward of somebody knocking a big house down without permission after they failed to get a planning consent. They've just gone ahead and knocked the house down, and we have very limited teeth. So that as a material planning issue, they've removed the obstacle by taking the house down, and enforcement has been to see this. But we all have a problem with retrospective planning applications, and I feel this we must treat them as a penalty. Now, I know that there are national rules and regulations, but are we able to toughen up on enforcement? Are we able to charge people for the extra time that the council is involved with retrospective planning applications, or even where we're going to enforcement? So I think that this document does need to be a little bit tougher, if it can be, as a public document, to set our case that we don't want to welcome retrospective planning applications, and that the council has got some teeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, the short answer is no. We can't penalise people for submitting retrospective planning applications. We have to deal with them like we deal with any other planning application. The fact that works have taken place is not something that we take into consideration when looking at these applications. So, for instance, the fact that you've built something without permission carries no additional weight in the decision-making process, but the opposite is also true, that if that if somebody submits a retrospective application, we can't then sort of penalise them because it's retrospective. So we still have to look at it in an objective manner. The question about costs and fees is an interesting one, and it's not something that loads of councils haven't thought about. Unfortunately, there is no mechanism for us to get fees or charges back unless we carry out what's called direct action. So, for instance, if somebody refuses to demolish an unauthorised building on which there's an enforcement notice under the Local Government Act dating back to the 1970s, we can actually charge them the fees that it actually costs us, but then also an additional, I think, up to 20% establishment costs. So, and that is the only way in which we can get some of our fees and costs back. When you look at prosecutions, I think, as we all know, that when people pay fines for prosecutions, those don't come to the council. And usually, when costs are awarded, and we've had costs awarded for us over the last couple of weeks for 2 successful prosecutions, the fees do not cover anywhere near the costs. So the enforcement function is expensive. It's mostly a reactive service, and we deal with about 500 complaints a year, and we issue notice on about 10% of those, and then only a small fraction of those actually go to prosecution.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Chairman, firstly, I'd just like to say how fortunate we are to have an enforcement service, because I know many authorities don't. It's paragraph 2.6, which I wanted to ask about. It says the basic principle of planning law is that it is not an offence to carry out work without planning permission. While such development is unauthorised, councils must consider the expediency of taking formal action. I just find the whole paragraph somewhat unclear. I mean, if it's unauthorised but it's okay, then I don't understand why the council is talking about taking action. If there is action they should take because it's wrong. I just think the paragraph needs clarifying a bit, because I don't think it comes over very clearly. I have a concern also about the fact that you talk about how people can make their comments, their complaints, and it's all digital. There's nothing there for the people who aren't online. I know we're encouraging everyone to go online. We have a number of the large sections of the population which doesn't. And I do think there needs to be some alternative way of getting in touch. It can't just be digital for the people who can't do it that way. And just to pick up on the retrospective planning applications, should the council be doing more to advertise to and inform the residents what needs planning permission? Because it's quite confusing now with all the permitted development that can be done without planning permission. I just wondered to sort of cut down on these retrospective applications, which we don't like when they come to planning committee. Can you just have a bit of a marketing exercise to tell people, or education exercise, tell people what needs to be submitted. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, we'll have a look at paragraph 2.6. I mean, the wording that is there, it basically reflects both the good practice guidance and the wording that's actually in the government's own document. So I guess it's a distinction that sometimes is difficult to understand. And I think the whole thing about planning is this. So if you do something without permission and you need permission, and it turns out that planning permission is then granted or would have been granted, then no council will take enforcement action against. So we don't take action against the act of carrying out the development. We look at whether the development is acceptable or not, and then take it from there. So I know members don't like retrospective planning applications, but I think we try to strike a balance, because sometimes people truly don't know. And like you say, planning is very complicated, and permitted development changes all the time. And also people don't always really understand what actually constitutes development and what not. So I guess for those people who make an honest mistake, I guess the government's idea with allowing retrospective planning applications is to not penalise those people for making an honest mistake. So, we, like I say, we will assess retrospective planning applications just as if the development is not taking place at all. So, but yes, we'll look at the wording. And then secondly, regarding looking at launching a campaign for permitted development and other rights, that's certainly something that we can discuss with our comms team. However, the planning portal, which is the government or used to belong to the government, has got very, very detailed graphics explaining permitted development, both for houses, for flats, satellite dishes, so really down to the smallest detail. And we do actually link to those pages from our council website. So I think what we could do is just, and actually this plan creates an opportunity for us to just sort of market or say to people that we are adopting a new enforcement plan, and by the way, you should go and check these websites for permitted development rights. So thank you, that's a good suggestion.
Actually, Chairman, if I can just come in there just to add on to what Andrew said, on our website there is actually part of the planning web page that just actually says, do you need planning permission? You just click on that, and as Andrew said, it brings up the link through to planning portal. And I think if you've been to our member training on planning previously, we've talked about the interactive house. You literally just hover over this house and it tells you various things about whether you need planning permission or what is permitted development. So perhaps Andrew, we can have a look at that and making that a bit clearer so people can look at that.
And then, sorry, just your last point, Councillor, was about different channels for people who don't have access to digital channels. So yes, that's something that we'll have a look at, and we'll speak to our colleagues in the contact centre, because they regularly pass people through to us who speak to them on the phone. So that's not a problem.
Thank you. Any more questions from any members? So can we recommend that this goes forward with the amendments or the review of the different bits? It is actually a draft one, so but can we agree that it goes forward?
Agreed.
Thank you. All right, so moving on then to probably the main event of the evening. Green infrastructure strategy, which is item 9 on the agenda, pages 47 to 56, and it's to consider the attached draft cabinet report, appendices, which form the supplementary agenda, which I'm sure you've all got. Who's taking us through this one, please? Is that you, Alison?
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heather. Just do a brief introduction. This report, which, as you rightly say, is due to go to Cabinet on the 20th of April, sets out the changes proposed to be made to the draft Green Infrastructure Strategy that was agreed by Cabinet last year for the purposes of consultation. So that consultation was undertaken in June and July 2020. And as a result of that, we received over 900 comments. And Appendix 2 in the supplementary sets out in summary form all the comments that we received and how these have been dealt with. And the strategy that's now being proposed for adoption is attached in Appendix 1 to the report, and it's in a number of parts, which I'll come back and explain in a minute. Many of the comments that we received related to suitable alternative natural green space, and so there's a detailed response to those comments, which is set out in Appendix 6. So the Council's emerging local plan sets out policies in relation to the provision and enhancement of green and blue infrastructure, seeks to protect the district's ecological assets and to achieve high quality design. To support these policies and also to address the requirement to provide avoidance or mitigation measures to manage the potential impacts of growth on protected sites, including Epping Forest, so particularly to deal with the impact of recreational pressure on the special area of conservation. The Council has developed a green infrastructure strategy, And the idea of the strategy is to ensure high quality green and blue infrastructure, including provision of suitable alternative natural green space and site-specific projects are delivered alongside the growth proposed in the local plan for the district. So this green infrastructure strategy will be used to inform the Council's response to Action 6 of the Local Plan Inspector's Advice Note of 2nd of August 2019, which, following the hearings into the local plan, asked the Council to provide clear evidence that the necessary suitable alternative natural green space could be delivered over the plan period, including proposals for the provision that was required in the first 5 years of the plan itself. So this strategy will act as a guide in the design, development, management and implementation process to ensure the creation of a sustainable network to provide connections between existing communities and the new communities, the current amenity spaces and the countryside and green belt. And there's very much a focus on bringing even small and larger sites forward on there being landscape-led design. In response to the representations we received following the consultation last year, we've made quite a lot of changes to the structure of the document and also in relation to the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation. So in response to the comments, particularly from Natural England and some of the developers as well, we've provided much more site-specific guidance on each of the suitable alternative natural green spaces that we're requiring to be provided for the key strategic sites in the district. So that's North Weald, Bassett, and the communities around Harlow, and to some extent around South Epping. We've also recognised the on-site mitigation measures, the SAMS measures, in the strategy, which obviously Cabinet approved back in October 2018. And we've also included a new section, which is section 4 of the strategy, to include site-specific projects. And this is something that Natural England and the Conservatives felt that we needed to bring forward enhancements to current projects or current open spaces in the district, particularly at Roding Valley and at the Thaden Boyce Woodland Trust site. Those sites are obviously already provide some amenity provision and alternative walking spaces, but it's felt that there was capacity on those sites for there to be more visitors, and enhancements to them would be beneficial and would ensure that that people use those rather than going to the forest if they were more convenient, particularly for daily dog walking and so on. Those two projects were already included in our infrastructure delivery plan, but we've now included costings in the strategy itself for those two projects to bring them forward and make sure that they are delivered. And as a result, we're asking for developer contributions from sites that come forward in the south of the district in the parishes of Thaden Boyce, Loughton and Buckhurst Hill to provide contributions specifically towards those projects. So, as I say, we've restructured it, obviously taking account the comments, but also the comments from the Quality Review Panel. And you'll see attached to the report are the Quality Review Panel discussions that took place during the preparation of the strategy. So you now have 5 parts essentially to the strategy: a primer which introduces the green and blue infrastructure strategy itself and explains what it's about. Part 1, which is an implementation section looking at the existing network and how we can make improvements to the existing network. Part 2, really for the smaller sites, how we're going to approach landscape-led design and what the focus needs to be for planning applicants bringing forward those smaller sites. Part 3 is for the strategic allocations and the suitable alternative natural green space that I've already identified. And Part 4 is the infrastructure enhancement projects that I've also just described, to ensure that there is mitigation for the projects coming forward in the south of the district. So apart from part 4, all the material was there before, but just in a slightly different format. We've tried to make it a bit easier to read by breaking it down into specific parts so that everyone needs to read the primer, but the 4 appendices can be read independently, in a sense, depending on what projects you're bringing forward. So that's all I'm going to say by way of introduction. I'll try and answer questions.
Members, are there any questions? Councillor Bassett.
Thank you. Yes, shall I say it's quite a weighty tome to read. I'm slowly working my way through all the bits, but I know there has been quite a lot of consultation on the way, and I know I personally attended 2 sessions on it. And I think we're getting there. I dare say it's not perfect. I dare say some of the sites will end up being very contentious, and I dare say developers will moan about how much they've got to pay to contribute to it. But it is a good place to start from. There is an awful lot of good stuff in there, but I think it does take a lot more reading to fully understand it.
Councillor McCready.
Thank you, Chairman. And I welcome these green initiatives. I've just wanted to make 2 points. The first is mostly for your information. The head of sustainability at Taylor Wimpey has announced that they will be adding hedgehog highways to all their new developments. Hedgehogs are now red listed. They're also adding other wildlife enhancements. And I'm pleased that Qualis are including bat boxes and bird boxes on the proposed new leisure centre in Epping. And hopefully they will expand what they're doing and follow the example of Taylor Wimpey. There are several hedgehogs already present in the St John's Road area. And I'm also hoping that the developers for the other sites will take these green issues on board. My second point, I hope this is pertinent for here, is on page 345, when we look at the sites for Epping, surely these figures are not current. They've already changed a lot. But I would like to add at this point, we've got no school provision, but then we're talking about blue and green infrastructure tonight. And equally, with the South Epping site, 450 homes, possibly load more. I've been talking to our local head teacher, and she would like some direction as to what school provision is going to be put down there. So maybe that's not the right place to ask this, but I would like some answers. Thank you.
Or someone can come back to you on that one, but yes, as I say, this
Thank
is.
you.
All I would say is the infrastructure delivery plan sets out the educational provision that's required to be delivered to meet the proposed growth in the district, and that was agreed with county and only reviewed again last year when we published an updated version of the infrastructure delivery plan. So I would suggest as a starting point that you have a look there. If it doesn't give you the answer, then obviously do come back.
Thank you.
So is there any more? So if you'd like to carry on then.
I haven't got anything further. I haven't got anything further to say. Obviously, it has been out to consultation. The information that's in there, apart from part 4, the site-specific enhancement projects, is basically the same information that went out to consultation, just ordered in a different structure. The site-specific projects, enhancement projects themselves, were in the infrastructure delivery plan back in 2017. The only difference is now that we're obtaining funding for them, having done some further work around costings to bring those projects forward. So this really is the final jigsaw piece in the jigsaw to go to the inspector for us to be able to move the local plan forward and go out to main modifications consultation. And obviously there'll be another opportunity for residents and members and developers indeed to make any further comments at that stage.
Thank you. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is just a question. It's sort of related to your report, Alison. It was obviously there when we're looking at alternative sites. One thing that's happened very recently, obviously with the lockdown, is we've seen how many people travel who are not resident of Epping Forest District, but obviously live on the borders and have travelled in to use our forests recreationally and other sites. I just wondered, has it been a useful exercise to see how much additional traffic that we have from other districts and other authorities, and whether that's something going forward that we might look into when we consider these alternative sites? I'm thinking, obviously there's also people that travel from our district to other districts, for example, from places like Ongar, they go to places like Chelmsford recreationally, Hatfield Forest, because that's geographically closer. I just wondered if when we've been looking into this, that there's been any useful from the last year, any useful data about people travelling, from other authorities to here, and whether that could influence decisions in the future.
Thank you for that. We have done visitor surveys, we did visitor surveys jointly with the adjoining authorities in 2017 and then again in 2019 in terms of ascertaining where most of the visitors to Epping Forest came from. Anecdotally, we know from the forest and some of the information they collected themselves last year that there is a view, like you've suggested, that people are coming from a much greater distance to the forest, and they certainly want to do a further visitor survey in the next year or so. But I think everybody feels that may the pattern of where people come from and how people come may well change in the next year or so as we get post-COVID pandemic. And therefore, it would be, if we took a snapshot now, we wouldn't necessarily be planning on the best basis, going forward. So I think there are certainly plans to look at that. And anecdotally, as I say, they have experienced people coming from much further afield. They are the conservators who are responsible for managing the forest are looking at bringing forward a number of different projects for the forest itself to manage the pressure on the forest, and that is subject to discussion at the moment with the other competent authorities about which projects should be funded through developer contributions and which should be funded in alternative ways.
Councillor Bassett.
So just to add to that on behalf of Jamie, is the Economic Board, there's a tourism group on that where we have in fact been getting information on where tourists are coming from and also what they're actually looking for, and the website, everything Epping, or the Epping Forest website that we have, visit Epping Forest. It shows you what people are looking for, what people have booked, and it gives you a trend as to how many people are employed in tourism and an idea as to the direction. Obviously, in these current times, stay indoors, stay local, stay this, stay that, it's a bit distorted this year, and I should imagine there is some past history there which will give you a trend, but where it goes in the future, I'm not quite sure.
I think anybody is. Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Just to let members know that obviously, thanks Jamie for raising that point this evening. We have got some ANPR data that supports where visitors have been coming from. As you know, that we had to work with Corporation of London, Essex County Council and other agents to get the red lines put in at High Beach. One of the key things that was happening there is with the ANPR stuff was showing up, we were getting an awful lot of visitors driving to the forest during lockdown, around the first lockdown, and they were coming from as far away as Cambridge. We had one or two from Oxford area, and we had quite a few from London boroughs of Waltham Forest, Redbridge, Hackney, Islington, who will drive out to the forest for a day out, because a lot of these people as well, you have to remember, are living in 1 or 2 bedroom flats, small accommodation. They don't see any green space as such in their local area. And I know that the Corporation of London we tried to discourage people coming out as far as this, but they'd literally shut a lot of the parks in the inner London areas to stop people taking recreational breaks. I think there's been further discussions and things have moved on since then, because obviously they clarified that people could take exercise and go for a walk. That led to further problems of people taking that to the extreme and saying, can I get a beer? Can I get a glass of wine out of the window of the pub and things like that? And so we have had a lot of issues, but generally I think that this is a good way forward. It's a good start of an updated database for us. And I think things can only improve and we will monitor and see how the visitor numbers through ANPR are increasing going forward. Hopefully they'll start to stabilise. If we can just remind members that if you live in areas like North Weald, you do have the forest on your doorstep. So use the forest on your doorstep. Don't drive all the way over to Connaught Waters to use it, because you've got a pond. Try and use the areas that are local to where you live. And I think Alison would agree that most of it should be within walking distance. The idea being we don't want to take cars to the forest. And I know that we're trying to get things done with the SAC. But obviously, if everybody did one less journey through the forest, it would have a massive impact on the air quality and the standards that we're trying to achieve. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, I think we'll all agree there's been a phenomenal amount of work put into this document. If there's no further questions, can we agree that this goes forward to Cabinet for adoption?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We don't have any other business on this one, so that's it then. So the date of future meeting will be on the 22nd of June, 2021. Hopefully we're all still here. And on that note, I'll close the meeting at 1 minute past 8.